Welcome back to another episode of Big Apple Breakdown. Today, we have a special guest to join the show. We have men's basketball beat writer for the Kentucky Kernel, Tyler Russell. Tyler, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, guys. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited. Let's talk some hoops, man. It's the best time of the year.
Of course. Thanks
Yes,
for
sir.
coming
Tyler,
on.
great to have you on. Excited to talk some March Madness with you. Everyone, as always, remember like, comment, subscribe, follow us on our socials, Big Apple Breakdown and everything. Thank you.
All right. To start off our episode, I want to talk about the beauty of this weekend. What makes this weekend and the next 2 days so special to not only sports fans, but to just any casual fan watching this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, you wake up and then at 12:40, I mean, there's just college basketball games all day. So for the basic college basketball fan, that's enough to have anyone interested. I mean, obviously you have upsets and a bunch of different stuff going on, but in terms of the casual fan, I mean, who wouldn't want to just wake up and watch sports all day? I mean, you got basketball all day. And it's not like I just said, it's not like they're just normal basketball games. I mean, you got 13 versus 4 upsets, 12 versus 5. We saw 2023 16 beat a one seed for like the first or the second time ever. So just the fact that anything could happen, I feel like is enough to draw a lot of people in. You got people, flying all over the country for Kentucky, not even just Kentucky, but like just fans all over. It's just the passion and anything could happen, I really feel like is what draws a lot of people in because a lot of the upsets that happen, if it happened in the regular season, if the two teams played each other, chances of the upset happening are not going to happen. But as soon as it enters March and there's conference tournaments and obviously the NCAA tournament itself, anything could happen, which is going to draw in a lot of people.
Yeah, and also I feel
Yeah, the
like
one and done aspect.
sorry,
Sorry about that.
it's hard on Zoom. It's hard to not talk over each other. Sorry.
Go ahead.
It, it's also cool to see some of these kids from these lesser known schools like making a name for themselves. Like we see it every year where someone who plays at a mid-major becomes an absolute superstar overnight.
Yeah, I mean they're not really expected to do anything. I mean, you have schools like St. Francis, Pennsylvania, who I knew I just lost in the first four last night, but you got teams that people have never even heard of with kids that, never even thought they'd play D1. They get an opportunity to go to a small D1 school, and then the next thing you know, they're like Jack Golke making a name for themselves,
Hmm.
signing NIL deals, and that's also another really, really awesome part that I forgot to mention. Whether your team gets upset by people like that or schools like that, it's kind of just something you have to respect because that's another reason that this sport is just amazing.
Of course. I got a question for you.
Yeah, the
Oh, go ahead, Johnny.
I think the one and done aspect just makes it so special because like last year, Kentucky versus Oakland, if it's like the NBA, Kentucky probably wins that in 5 games, but you get to see so many more upsets because there's only 40 minutes and that decides your season.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if a
it's do or
team, sorry, if a team goes cold or something in one game, then their season is just over.
yeah, just like that. It's done.
I got a question for you, Tyler. So over the course of a year, there's a lot of great sporting events like Super Bowl, World Series, uh, NBA Finals. Is this the best 2 day period in sports, like the first round of the March Madness?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think like we just talked about, the thing that makes it so special is that it's just one game. I mean, you got a World Series, you have an NBA Finals, you have a Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, you have ultimately seven tries to really put your heart and soul into it, and you lose one game, and then you can adjust on that and be like, all right, we'll figure it out next game. Whereas we just talked about with the upsets, I mean, if you come in not ready, you're done. Your season, your fifth year seniors, your seniors, it's over just like that. And I think that, that's another thing that makes it really great for those schools that don't really have a lot of fame and a lot of people in them, and a lot of players that have like NBA talent. Which when they make those upsets, they kind of ride with those upsets. That kind of what brings a lot of people in too. So I think that aside from those sports where there's all those series that go really far, one and dones, do or dies, that's what makes the sport as great as it is. I mean, everyone loves the game seven. That's the greatest two words in sports. And March Madness, the whole tournament's a game seven, pretty much.
And I think this event is one of three events where people will watch no matter what. I would say the Olympics up with the Super Bowl. Like my mom watched this. She probably won't watch a college basketball game all year up until this
Yeah,
day.
same,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's
And
true.
that's what we just talk about, like just fans coming in and just kind of realizing what's actually going on. And like I just said, the game seven type of vibe, the whole tournament is what really draws a lot of people in too.
All right,
And
moving on to Kentucky basketball, which you cover every day. So this year, obviously, the first year of the Mark Pope era. So what about this team is different compared to some of the John Calipari teams?
Yeah, I think right off the bat, you can kind of realize that John Calipari at Kentucky wasn't fitting as much as it was in the past. So when you got to look at what that entails, and everyone thinks of John Calipari and Kentucky as an NBA factory, which is cool for the actual players. But when you're talking about a fan base such as, the Big Blue Nation, they don't really care about the NBA. It's fun to watch a guy for 2, 3, 4 years and then root for him when he goes to the NBA. That's fun and all, but they're college basketball fans. They're Kentucky fans. They're not Kentucky to maybe Justin Edwards to the 76ers or Reed Shepherd to the Rockets. They care about their team. So when you go to the March Madness NCAA tournament and you lose in the first round, it kind of just defeats the whole purpose of, rooting for it doesn't defeat the purpose, but it takes a lot of away from rooting for your team and stuff like that. So I really think that what differentiates this team and Mark Pope from John Calipari is the will to win. I mean, Cal the other day before Arkansas even played in the SEC tournament, he literally said, I'm not just saying this like, oh, he doesn't care. He literally said, I do not care about the SEC tournament. I think of it as pretty much a warm up for the NCAA tournament, which, when you tell 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, oh, you can go play in this tournament, make sure you try, but if you lose, it's not the end of the world. We don't really care about it. What is that going to do? How are they going to think of it? I mean, John Calipari is the holy grail of college basketball for the longest time. And now when he tells you that as your coach saying this game doesn't really matter, this tournament doesn't matter, okay, so what are you supposed to do? I mean, obviously you're going to try and still play your basketball, but that's just a really horrible mindset in my opinion. And Mark Pope, the whole thing he said all year since his inaugural press conference is I understand the assignment. And when he talks about the assignment, he's talking about the SEC tournament, the NCAA tournament, the regular season, like how much it matters. And in terms of, not just coaching players, you have Kentucky players like Kobe Brea, Ansley Almanor, Tako Tega away, and Andrew Carr, who weren't at mid majors. But for those guys that were at mid major schools and didn't really have the opportunity, now all of a sudden they're playing at the cathedral of college basketball. So if you lose, they understand. And it's not like they saw Kentucky lose and they're like, oh man, like whatever, we don't play for them. They saw them lose and now they saw the backlash that the school as a whole got. So that itself is just motivation. And for the fifth year senior guys, if they lose, it's it. That's it. I mean, they had like I'll take Kobe Bryant for example at Dayton. He played at Dayton, and now if he loses, his college career is over, and he has a chance to actually embark on a journey with Kentucky and just making at least past the first, second, maybe at least a Sweet 16. I think they absolutely can do it just because of how much more it means and the mindset that they have.
yeah, and I remember Calipari in recent years when he was with Kentucky saying, "Oh, the SEC tournament doesn't matter," and that was a big part for Kentucky fans who grow up and are just like entrenched in this environment. All they know is Kentucky basketball. It turns them off to John Calipari a little bit because they're like, "No, this does matter. This is important to us as
Yeah.
fans."
And ultimately, Cal is the final say. I mean, he's the head coach. So, I
Hmm.
mean, you could have an entire fan base who disagrees with him, and it's just really frustrating because as much as they disagree, he doesn't care. And he doesn't really, a lot of coaches, they really shouldn't listen to the fan base in terms of what you should do, like analytically and with players going here and there. They're with the guys every day. They see the practice and
Hmm.
stuff. But I mean, that's just a really easy solution. First thing to fix is that you should care about every single game you play. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought that
I,
was a given.
I also feel like something that's different about college sports than pro sports is the fans' opinion. I feel like bleeds into the program a little bit more than like, say, Yankees fans complaining about the Yankees. Like I feel like the college college fan has more of a voice almost, you know?
Yeah, especially now with like NIL and stuff. I mean,
Mm.
you have like we're seeing with Nate Ament, five-star recruit. We're seeing people literally donate money for them
Exactly.
for Kentucky or these schools to pay him. So in terms of that, that absolutely plays a factor in it. And just being on a college campus, I mean, I know Kentucky Kernel, the what I write for, we have some TikTok people that go out and they go around and they interview students and they ask their thoughts on it. And ultimately, in the past, many people were not happy with Cal. And we
Mm.
did something where, they went around and asked, like, do you think, when he was about to leave and there was talks and rumblings of that, people are like, yeah, like he doesn't care. Like he's not a good coach anymore. He's not what he was. So he needs to go out. And I'm not saying the athletic director, Mitch Barnhart, listened to the students, but when you have a fan base and you have a bunch of people that ultimately don't want him there, I totally would think that Big Blue Nation pushed out John Calipari. And if
Yeah.
Mark Pope's first year didn't go the way it has gone so far, it could be a little bit of a different story. But ultimately, they were right. I mean,
Mm.
Kentucky, every fan, they tell you that they're not feeling better about this tournament than they were in the past, and they're probably lying.
Yeah, and it ultimately wasn't uh like John Calipari left on his own because if Kentucky wanted to fire him or move on from him, they would have had that giant buyout. But it ultimately was the fans. He probably didn't feel appreciated, and honestly, I don't blame him for being like, oh, you don't appreciate me. I'm gonna leave and go and try to make Arkansas a better program.
Yeah, and I know a lot of the inside reports were saying that Cal did realize he was not expecting the backlash that he got just because of like his recent accolades and winning that national championship 2012, the 2015 Devin Booker and Karl Anthony Towns making it that far. Like, they weren't really he thought that he was more appreciated than he was. And then once you lose again as a three seed to Oakland and you're out of the first round of the tournament again, everyone was kind of just like, all right, get this guy out. And then once he realized it, that's when he talked with the AD and was like, all right, I think I should step down or resign, and then you guys could
Yeah.
just move on.
Speaking of
I
this
really like
year,
the point you brought up about.
go ahead, Johnny.
All right, sorry about that. I really like the
Sorry.
point you brought up about the older players, difference between the younger players. Um, I think there's a level of desperation for these older guys. It's their last chance. If you look at the past Kentucky rosters, like Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd, those guys knew they're going to be first round picks next year. They have a whole career ahead of them. I think it brings values compared to the older guys. Like even Jack Golke next year, he said he's like, I know I'm not going to be in the NBA. Talked about that, but I think the level of desperation brings out something in these older guys that you just don't see with these top 10 picks.
Yeah, I mean, and you have the upset guys like, for example, Jack Olke, like you said, he knew he wasn't going to the NBA, and he said that on an interview. He flat out said, like, I know I'm not an NBA talent. So his level of desperation to actually win and make a name for himself is a lot different than Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham, Justin Edwards, DJ Wagner, who actually ended up staying. But guys like that who have the NBA on their mind, it's like Jack Golke loses in the NCAA tournament, his basketball career is likely over. Where these guys, it's like, all right, we lose. Dang, that sucks. Now what? Now we go get, 10 times more NIL money than we're making in the NBA, and, they get to live out their dream. So that's a big difference in terms of desperation. And a lot of guys on the Kentucky roster, I haven't looked recently, but I don't think any of them are, projected first round picks. So for them, they're even trying to make more of a name for themselves on a national stage like the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and a lot of the guys that went to Kentucky under Cal, they weren't going there to win a national title. They were going there because it was just their stepping stone. It was an NBA factory to project them to the next level and give them some more national exposure.
Yeah, and that's like we just said, that's the massive difference in, actually caring to win and wanting to win. If you care
Mm,
to win, you're gonna do whatever it takes. If you just want to win, then you're not. And if you lose, it's not that big a deal, which is a big difference.
mm.
Go ahead, Henry, with your question.
So moving on to Kentucky this year. So they're a three seed, and I have a question. They've dealt with their fair share of injuries this year. So I have a question for you. How will the injuries of Jackson Robinson and Kirk Krista affect the team for the tournament, and who has to step up in their absence?
Yeah, so with Jackson and Kerr out, I mean, Kentucky's had a really long time. I think over 10 plus game. Obviously, Kerr got hurt back in December. So they've had a lot of time to actually
Mm.
figure out how to play without him. But even him, like even though they've had that much time, he's a massive spark. I mean, he may not be the best point guard in the country, the most
Mm.
efficient scorer, but when he came off the bench for Lamont Butler, he was just a spark, like a massive spark. And, his energy. I mean, I recorded a video and put it on Twitter when Kentucky was playing Oklahoma in the SEC tournament. There was a really big bucket. Oklahoma called a timeout. Otega Owe and I don't remember who it was, but someone on Oklahoma were like getting into it a little bit. And Kirk came off the bench, stared him down, walked back, and just started hyping up Otega even more. So in terms of March Madness, where it's honestly not just all basketball, skills and talent like we see with these upsets. But just having someone like that is, going to be a massive loss. Not having someone like that. And for Jackson Robinson, one of the best three-point shooters, they've had some time to play without him, but there's really no doubt that that's going to be a big loss. And with that being said, if who needs to step up, I would honestly say I need Kobe Brea. Kobe Brea needs to step up tremendously. I mean, if he's not on his game, Kentucky's game kind of, falls down a little bit. So if he's up and even if he just comes out and hits a three right off the bat, maybe two threes in the first 10 minutes, 5 minutes, that'll be something that plays a crucial part. But if he's not scoring, I think that their offense is going to kind of trickle down a little bit.
I agree with that. Yeah. Also,
Um,
go ahead, Johnny.
no, you keep going. I was gonna ask another question.
I was gonna ask about Lamont Butler too because he has been banged up all year. Uh, what's his outlook for the tournament? Is he gonna be fully healthy, and what can we expect from him?
Yeah, so right after the SEC tournament, when they lost or when they went out against or they beat Oklahoma, he went out in the first half, didn't play the entire second half, and you kind of just saw right from there how big of a key piece he is because they started the game on an 8-0 run, and then they were doing pretty good throughout the first half, and once he went down, the whole offense kind of just went down a little bit, and they allowed Oklahoma to come back into the game. So Mark Pope says that, he got some screening, he's good, he's healthy, he'll be ready to go. But he's been dealing with shoulder injuries all season, and he's, I think, missed a total of 6 or 7 games with that shoulder injury. So now that it's do or die, like we were talking about, I feel like he will be back. And I'm not going to say he's 100% or not, because I honestly don't know. But if I had to take an assumption, take a guess, I would probably say he's not. And that if this wasn't an NCAA tournament coming up, they'd probably still be holding him out. But with him back, I mean, even if he's not 100%, we see him wearing that like massive brace on his shoulder. He's still going to give it his all. He's still the best defender on the team. He's going to lock down all the guards, which, in March, guard plays a massive part of it. So he's going to lock up these guys. And that's really going to help them. But if he's 100% healthy, I would say that they can go even deeper. But it's just really, really worrying because you see every time he's involved in like some physical activity like driving, sticking his arm in there to try and, steal it. You kind of get like oh, no, 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 don't do that because
Mm.
you're kind of worried that he's going to hurt his shoulder again. And if he does, I mean, without him in the lineup, they're probably not going to be able to do very much. So keeping him healthy is pretty,
And
pretty important.
I've been saying all year that he's an important piece for March because a couple years ago at San Diego State, he was a huge piece of their deep run in the
Hmm.
tournament. So,
Yeah, and he,
And he
he
hit
hit
that buzzer beater.
Yeah,
mm.
to knock off FAU in the Final Four. And a lot of people don't realize that the game wasn't tied. Like the pressure on that shot, it wasn't if he missed, then they were like, oh, okay, it's all right. Like we'll go to overtime. They were down. They were down by like a point. So if he didn't hit that, it was over. But he hit it and then they went to the Natty. So
So I got a question about this upcoming matchup with Troy. Obviously, most fan bases going to be nervous to play a 14 seed, but Kentucky's lost in the first round 2 of the last 3 years. What do they have to do to avoid disaster once again?
yeah, so I think, even on every Kentucky fan's mind, I mean, you saw ESPN post it the other day. They had Jack Olkey and Doug Eater, and they said, "Who could it happen again?" So it's on everyone's mind. But for it to not happen again, I would just say the players don't need to fully push it out of their mind because if they don't push it out of their mind, or if they push it out of their mind, and they're kind of just going to forget about the significance of it. But they do need to understand. And I think they do understand, which is, like we said earlier, what differentiates this team in the past is that they understand if they lose, it's not the end of the world, but it's pretty much the end of the world, especially with this year's team, having eight quad one wins, the most in program histories, or not quad one, top 15. So they understand, and it's in the blink of an eye, a season can end. So what they need to do is they just need to go out there and play their offensive style. They're scoring like 85 plus, I think 88, 89 points per game, which is top five in the nation. I think they're number three right now in points per game. So if they just, their offense has been really good since that Ole Miss, or their defense has been really good since they lost to Ole Miss and in the beginning of February. They have like the top 20 defense since that game. So if they take care of stuff and just keep stuff tight on the defensive end, with the closeouts, their offense could absolutely take care of itself. But I just think they need to go in there and realize what's going on. But in the moment, they can't really think about it too much because then, the nerves and stuff will start to boil over.
I also don't think that this team carries the pressure of those early losses, early upsets as the teams in the past because Calipari's not there. It's Mark Pope. It's just a totally different team. And I just don't, I feel like they're not worried about, oh, this has happened the last few years. I think they're worried about what's in front of them and just taking care of business against Troy.
I agree. And I think that's what it should be. But like, I mean, they're probably not carrying the pressure of, okay, Cal's teams, but
Mhm.
people are still on, a lot of people that,
That's
don't
true.
follow Kentucky the way that we do. They're all just like, all right, well, Kentucky could lose again, another 14 versus 3. And it's like they hear about it. I mean, whether they say they're on social media or not, I mean, everyone has Instagram, they're on Twitter, they hear about it. I mean, I've been in the some of the press conferences where some people have asked about it. So they know, they totally understand what's on the horizon and then what could be and what was in the past. So like I just said, if they start worrying about that, then it, could end pretty bad. But they just got to do what they do best, and that's just score.
That is very true actually about that media and fans definitely bring it up to them. So
Yeah.
All right, Tyler. How far do you expect this Kentucky Wildcat team to go? What are your expectations?
Yeah, so I'm gonna assume this whole thing is if Lamont is fully healthy. Even if he's not fully healthy, at least plays in every game and doesn't get hurt again. I could honestly see them going as far as Sweet 16. I think that they could definitely beat Troy, 100% capable. And then they'd play either Illinois, Texas, or Xavier. If they play Illinois, they're a very streaky team, Illinois. So if they catch them on, even not their best day, and Kentucky's just doing what they do best and scoring and playing decent defense, they could absolutely win that. Even if they play Texas or Xavier, they lost to Texas, once this year, and they were leading that entire game. I was there, and they lost. And literally just the last 5 minutes is what lost that game for them. They kind of like took their foot off the gas. And like we were talking about, knowing that you can't do that in this tournament at all with the do or die one and done games, I think that they're actually gonna keep their foot on the gas. So, and even if they play Xavier, I mean, a lot of people are high on Xavier. Personally, I'm not that high on them. They had a decent year in the Big East, but if Kentucky, does what they do best, I mean, obviously anything could happen. They'd eventually have to run into Tennessee or Houston, but I think they could absolutely at least make the Sweet 16.
yeah, I agree with that. I don't think they'll go any further than Sweet 16, honestly. I feel like that's kind of their ceiling. And it's not
Yeah,
necessarily,
You don't think they can beat Tennessee?
I mean, we did once this year, but in a neutral environment, I don't know. I feel like we got off to a hot start and then have cooled down, have dealt with these injuries and stuff. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that in Mark Pope's first year, Kentucky ceiling is a Sweet 16. I just think like this will just be a year to build off of. Kentucky hasn't been to the Sweet 16 in a while.
Okay.
So,
yeah. I think, they beat Tennessee, at home. They beat them on the road. Now, if they played them again at a neutral site, I mean, I think it would just be a total war with the fan bases because, they're
mhm.
both going to show up. But I think, could they beat Tennessee again? Yes, absolutely. But could they lose to Tennessee the third time? The saying is it's hard to beat a team twice. Okay, but now it's really hard to beat a team three times. And
Three
I really think
times.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that if Kentucky can find a way past Tennessee, that'd be unbelievable. And I think Mark Pope, even if Mark Pope makes it, like you just said, to the Sweet 16 with this team, I think that, everyone's they're gonna be hooked. They're gonna be high on Mark Pope for
Mm.
at least going into next season. And this was, we didn't even talk about this. He built this roster from scratch. I mean, he, like we were talking about, has these mid-major guys. And next year they have Jasper Johnson coming in, Caden Lewis, Malachi Moreno. Apparently, according to Matt Jones of KSR, they already have, a really big guy from the portal coming in. No name's been announced yet, but this was the first year. No one knew how it was going to go. So if they go to the Sweet 16, absolutely they could just build off of it.
Yeah, I think this is just a big building block for next year. But
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to stay in the SEC. I just want to get your opinion. 14 SEC teams made it. I mean, is that just not absurd?
No, yeah, that's absolutely insane. And I really think that a lot of people on Twitter that have been saying like the SEC is overrated and, it's not as good as people make it out to be. Respectfully, that is just not true at all. I mean, this is a very tough conference. And we even saw Auburn, who dominated the entire year, and they didn't even make it to the SEC tournament championship. So, I mean, it is just such a dominating conference. And I think every SEC or every SEC team that is in the tournament has a chance to, do their thing and win. I think Oklahoma is the one playing UConn that could be an exit in the first round because I mean UConn's not as good as they used to be, but they have, Dan Hurley as the coach. And Oklahoma has Jeremiah Fears, which in guards, when it comes to March, guard play is massive, but I think Oklahoma is the least strongest that's in. But I think this SEC conference is insane.
I don't have a stat to back this up or anything, but I feel like coming off the SEC tournament in most years, when everyone's like, "Oh, SEC is the best conference and whatever," then they beat up on each other in the tournament, and then they go into the March Madness tournament. And I feel like a lot of SEC teams end up losing early on because they just exhausted themselves beating up on each other. Do you think there's any truth to that?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good medium. You could take one or two things out of it. You could either take they beat each other up, they're exhausted going into this time of the year, or you could take the route that it just prepared them to face anyone
Hmm.
because there are some of the top teams in the country. I think there is some truth to it, but in the first round, if you can make it past that and you're a decent team like 10, like Vanderbilt, or eight or nine, I think nine, like Oklahoma, you could start to just run out of gas around that point. But in terms of, preparing for the actual game, that definitely helps them out.
I agree, yeah.
This is a storyline I'm looking at. So John Calipari and Rick Pitino were one win away from St. John's in Arkansas for those two meeting. I mean, imagine that.
Yeah, that would be crazy. And a lot of people don't really recognize this, but Pitino and Cal don't like each other. I mean, they have some history going back, and I think that, if Arkansas does win, which I don't think they will, just going off of, how Cal approaches the tournament, like we talked about, that would be crazy. And honestly, that could be one of the best things that happens for the NCAA because, the ratings and the viewership there would just totally, skyrocket even more. And Rick Pitino, love him or hate him, but he's a really, really good coach. And he has this St. John's team, which is historically not good, like recently historically not good. And now they win the Big East tournament, and now they're back up. So,
So Tyler, which number one seed could be headed for an early exit this tournament?
yeah, I think honestly, that's really tough because it's always hard to tell with the one seeds who are so dominant throughout the regular season. But honestly, and this may be the hot take, but I think Auburn out of all other three because they lost three of their last four games. Um, didn't even make it to the SEC tournament championship, which a lot of people expected them to. And I really think that I think they can run into Louisville, and Louisville, in my opinion, should not be an eight seed. I think they are a lot better than that. I would say 4 to 5, honestly. But I think if they run into them, I mean, they got Michigan up there too, which Michigan could do a lot of things that a lot of people wouldn't expect. But I think that Auburn would have to be my one seed that, doesn't go as far as the rest.
Also, isn't that region playing in Rupp Arena?
Uh no, I think that's the South region. Or actually,
Okay.
yeah. No, that yeah, no, I think they would. They
Yeah, I
would.
thought Louisville is.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
and
they are.
don't you think they would have if they run into Auburn in Rupp Arena? Don't you think like Louisville right is like right there? They'd probably have all their fans traveling to that game, almost like a home
100%.
court advantage type of deal, and
Yep.
they're way underseated. So I could totally see that upset happening.
Yeah. And when Auburn played Kentucky, I think it was the last regular season or second to last regular season game for Kentucky. They lost. They got like 25, 30, or like 20 plus point loss. Let's just say that. And Miles Kelly from Auburn said, like, I love the Rupp Arena rims because he was actually unconscious that game. But I think Auburn going into that game, I mean, that plays a big role in like where you're playing and stuff. But if Auburn makes it that far, to go to Rupp Arena again and just keep playing there, I think that they could lose even though they absolutely torched Kentucky there. But like you said, it would be a home court advantage for Louisville if they both make it that far. So I think that that would actually play a massive factor. And I don't think Auburn is, I think they're strong, but 3 out of 4 losses. This is supposed to be when you're playing the best basketball of the season, and they're the opposite. They're playing quote unquote the worst basketball of the season in terms of wins and losses. So
Also, Bruce Pearl always says that like openly that he just hates playing in Rupp Arena because
yeah.
Kentucky's always beat up on him. But so moving on, who are your favorites to be in the Final Four? Who's your favorite from each uh part of the bracket to make it to the Final Four and win each region?
Yeah, so I think starting with the South, like I said, Louisville, but I also think Michigan State. I got Chase Richardson, Jaden Atkins, two really good, really, really solid guards. They finished season on a 7 game win streak, the regular season, and I think Michigan State is a team that a lot of people overlook because of their start. But you also can't take out Tom Izzo in March. I mean, he is awesome in March, made it far last year when a lot of people didn't expect him to in the first round. And I think that they could actually do a lot of good stuff. Now, moving to the East region, got to go with Duke.
Mm.
Even if Cooper Flag isn't 100% healthy, but we're going to take it as he's, healthy enough to, keep playing and do his thing. I think, Duke, even when he was out, they still won the ACC championship. They beat Louisville in the championship game without Cooper Flag. And, Cooper Flag leads them in every like category possible. I mean, points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals, literally everything. But if you take him out, they still got Kaman Maluach. They also have I wrote down a bunch of guys. Con Knapel averaging 14.4 a game, Tyrese Proctor. So Duke runs deep. They have a lot of good depth. But another team, this isn't really much of a shocker. I think Alabama from that
Mm.
region could actually make it pretty deep. Um, Averaging the most amount of points per game in the country with like 91. Mark Sears, Byron Philon, Aiden Holloway, they are deep. And they didn't even make it to the SEC tournament final, but because they ran into Florida, who, I think is gonna win. I don't even know what region they're in, but I gotta see. They are the West region, which I have them, making it out of that.
Mm.
So move to that one real quick. I mean, they got Alex Condon and Thomas Hogg, who, forwards that are actually really, really strong. They can both shoot pretty well. And Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Will Richard. I mean, they absolutely ran through the SEC tournament. They won, I think they beat Auburn by 20 plus points. They only held them to like 81, which, is not very characteristic for Auburn, who puts up
Mm.
like 90 something, like I just said, 85 plus a game, 90s. So I like Florida there, and that leaves us with the Midwest, who I really think is going to be Houston. You got Kentucky in there, you got Tennessee, but I know every year teams are different. But I'm still banking on Tennessee not making a Final Four. They've never made one, and I think that that's going to play a role, in the back of their heads. It's always talked about between Kentucky fans and Tennessee fans of, oh, Kentucky has this many Final Fours, and Tennessee's never even made one.
Mm.
But I'm not gonna this year. I don't think there's going to be anything different. They may make it to at least the Elite Eight, but I don't think that they're going to make it to the Final Four. So I'm going to go, with Michigan State, Duke, Florida, and Houston.
I noticed a local team in that you didn't mention, who we have mentioned a couple times during this episode, St. John's. Uh, they've been horrible the last, I don't know, 3, 4 decades, and Rick Pitino's kind of revitalized that program. How far do you see them going?
Yeah, I think they can make it Sweet 16, Elite Eight. The reason I don't have them in the Final Four is because their offense and their guards and their shooting is not, if you look
Mm.
at it, you wouldn't immediately jump out saying that's a Final Four team. The reason I think they may somewhat be able to make it at least the Elite Eight is because of their defense. I mean, Rick Pitino has them, running one of the best defenses in the country. And I think that, defense plays a massive part. You need to be able to, play good on both sides of the ball. But their offense to me just doesn't have enough to take them that far, especially when they'd run into, teams such as, what are they, Midwest. So, they'd run into, or not Midwest. Where even are they? I have tons of notes out here.
Let me
They
look.
would have to run to Duke, right? If I'm not mistaken. Would they have to play Duke?
Uh, I
My off?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think
Okay, I
so.
got my mixed up.
Well, no matter which one it is,
Yeah.
Mm.
they Elite Eight. I mean, with the offense they have, they don't really have enough to make it to the Final Four, in my
They would run
opinion. But
into to Kansas, Texas Tech.
yeah, which Texas Tech is deep. They're a good team that have come around a lot recently, a 3 seed. They're a good 3 seed, so I think they could absolutely just even beat St. John's.
I also noticed in a couple of St. John's games. I was at the Marquette game, the semifinal game, and Marquette jumped out to this big lead, but St. John just comes back and like wears these teams down. Uh, Ajiafor had 33 points, just dominant in the paint. But I do see your point where these other teams will just make a bunch of threes, and St. John's won't be able to keep up with them in a sense.
Yeah, they
Florida's
could
the one
stop.
seed in their
Yeah,
region, by the way.
Yeah.
exactly. So they'd run into Florida, but St. John's, you could say they have enough pieces to win on or to win a game off of their defense. Okay, but you could stop a team as much as you want. But if you're not,
Mm.
equally going back as much on the offensive end, which, they don't have the pieces to do, and they have like a really bad 3-point shooting percentage. I was listening to the podcast from Pardon My Take from Barstool with Rick Pitino, and Rick Pitino even said it. This was like a couple of weeks ago. He said, I had to make adjustments because my team is not good at shooting threes. We are not the offensive team that I was hoping to be, and it's just the defense is really their key part. But if they could play all the defense they want, but like I keep saying, if they don't make it as do as well on the offensive end, that's kind of going to hurt them.
Mm.
All right, so moving on, since it is March, it's always about the Cinderella teams. What possible upset do you see in the first round? And do you see any double-digit seeds making a run to the Sweet 16 Elite Eight?
Yeah. So right off the bat, a lot of people would think McNeese State, because they have a lot of hype right now. A lot of people have been tuning into them. They won the Southland Conference. But I don't think we saw it last year. They were in the same spot. They lost in the first round. I don't think McNeese State is going to beat Clemson. So that's one of the upsets that I took off immediately. And UC San Diego, who right off the bat, I took them before the bracket even came out. I thought this team could be the one that would actually run into, playing like they could actually make a run and maybe Sweet 16, Elite Eight. But I don't think that they're going to make it past. They have a 12-5 game who really drawing a blank on who they would play, UC San Diego. But when it came out, I didn't really think that they had enough to get past there. Do you have it up, Johnny?
I'm looking. Oh, Michigan.
Yeah. And I talked about that previously. I think Michigan has enough to at least make the Elite Eight, Sweet 16. So I think that UC San Diego, if they were playing any other team, I think that they can, get there. But my upset team would have to be High Point, 13 seed. I think they could beat number 4 Purdue, absolutely. They have Keza Griffa. They have Bobby Pettiford, who played at Kansas, now playing at High Point. They are on a, let's see, I wrote it down. They are on a, I think 11 game win streak, I want to
I
say.
saw they have the highest win streak in the country.
Yeah,
I
14
saw
game win
that.
streak. And I got this for you, Johnny. Ready? They have not lost since before the Luka Anthony Davis trade.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
So they
Yeah.
haven't
wow.
lost since
Yes.
January. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
That's
They've lost
crazy.
January 16th.
That's crazy.
You see a lot of mid-major schools that, they're not playing strong teams. They're in the Big South. They haven't really played that many strong teams, but what they're running in on right now and how well they're doing going into the tournament and their confidence. And I don't think Purdue is as good as they've been in the past. I mean, there's no Zach Edey there. So I really think that they could absolutely take care of business there. And I do see them at least making the Sweet 16. I think they can go on a pretty good run that a lot of people weren't expecting them to. a really small school out of North Carolina. A lot of people probably have never even heard of it. This is their first time
It's a
ever.
beautiful campus. I've been
Yeah,
there.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah, Barstool posted that. They did like a little panorama. They have like ice cream trucks for students for free, like a bunch of
It's like a
schools.
country club.
Yeah,
It is, yeah.
it seems like a really cool spot. And I think,
Mm.
a lot of hype that a lot of people aren't talking about because they're talking about, the UC San Diego's and
Mhm.
the other 12-5 games. I really think High Point could be a team that surprises a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's what March is all about. These lesser known schools that go and put themselves on the map. Like we saw with Loyola Chicago a couple years ago, UMBC. Like we know Fairleigh Dickinson because that's like kind of in our area, but random people in, I don't know, California, Texas, now they know what Fairleigh Dickinson is because they knocked off uh, Purdue and they went all the way, they made a run. So, uh, my next question is talking about Cinderellas and stuff. I'm gonna go to the other side of this. What powerhouse team or any team really is under the most pressure this year?
Yeah, I honestly, no biasy here. I would probably say Kentucky, honestly. Going off of, you could say that Kentucky isn't a 2 seed, a 1 seed like they've been, a bunch of times, but they're a 3 seed. And I think that the pressure that they have, like we were talking about in the beginning, just because of, the past, I think that that really plays a massive factor. And, we were going back and forth about, how many people realize it and, which teams could be the one to beat them and stuff like that. But I really think Kentucky has the most pressure on them, ultimately, especially in Mark Pope's first year. There's not a ton of pressure there.
Hmm.
But just, the overall brand of Kentucky, the state of Kentucky, what people expect from them, playing the Troy Trojans. Like a lot of people wouldn't expect them to lose that game, but it's something that, it's kind of been embedded into our minds because of the past. Other than that, I would probably say Auburn, just because the historic regular season that they had. A lot of people would expect them to do a lot of really good stuff. I mean, they have Janai Broome too, Chad Baker Mazzara, who a lot of people don't really like because, he's like 24, 25, and is only his third college basketball season. Chris Youngblood, Aiden Holloway, or not Aiden Holloway, he's on Bama, he used to play for Auburn, but they have a ton of those guys that a lot of people, don't really know. They didn't know in the beginning. They knew they'd be good. I mean, it's Auburn. But just because of how good their regular season was, and now they're lost 3 out of their last 4 games, I'd probably say there's a little bit of pressure on them too. Absolutely.
What about a team like Duke, that has Cooper Flag? They haven't really been the same Duke that they were since the Coach K era. Cooper Flag is probably set to leave after this year. I know there's some rumblings that if some of these work like bad teams have the number one overall pick, that he'll stay. But what about a team like Duke?
Yeah, I think Duke does have a lot of pressure as well. I mean, you could take any number one seed and just say, well, they're
Mm.
one of the top four team in the country. They should be in the Final Four. It's a 1 seed. But I think the thing that, the problem that Duke may run into is that Cooper Flag, Kon Knueppel, Kaman Malawach, like those guys are all freshmen. So that could be a problem that they run into in terms of pressure and lack of tournament experience. That actually may come back to haunt them a little bit. We even saw with Kentucky last year with, Reed Shepherd, DJ Wagner, Justin Edwards, like all these, really, really solid. I mean, even Zvonimir Ivisic, all these really solid, nationally known, players. And then now that they run into the NCAA tournament, they're a 1 seed. They don't really like, I don't think they're going to expect, what they have been. It's not like every other game. It's not like every other,
Yeah,
streak of games that they'd play. But with freshmen, I think that there is going to be a lot of pressure and it may be something because, 17 or not 17, Cooper Flag turned 18, but 18-year-olds, some 19-year-olds, there's definitely a lot of pressure on them too. But you could take any 1 seed and just say that there's pressure on them because there is. I
of
mean,
course,
but if I
yeah.
had to pick one, it'd be Auburn. But I would totally agree that Duke has a lot of pressure as well.
I really like your point about Kentucky because I don't think any of us expect them to be a Final Four team. We already talked about that, but they cannot lose in the first round again. They've just
Yeah.
been embarrassed, and I even think they kind of need a Sweet 16 appearance just to get people off their backs and the fan base to actually cheer for them, like give them some props.
Yeah, I mean, 2020, that season, that tournament didn't happen. 2021, they were not good. They didn't make the tournament. 2022, they lose to St. Peter's as a 2 seed, which is a really small school again in our area in Jersey City that I'm going to be honest with you guys, I didn't even know about until that
I'd
happened.
I'd
No,
never
I
heard of
was
the
I was
school.
gonna say that earlier.
Yeah, in
It's
this
like
area.
a high school gym.
Yeah, I had
Yeah.
no idea who they were. No one even knew who Doug Eater was, but that happened. The next year they, get past Providence in the first round and they, almost beat Kansas State. That was actually a pretty good game. They lose that. And then now last year they lose to Jack Olke in Oakland, which again, I didn't even know what Oakland was until that, I started scouting Oakland and then I realized they had Trey Townsend, Jack Olke, and Calipari, I mean, he was hitting some crazy shots, but the
Mm.
scouting report, there's at least two guys you need to watch. He didn't do that, but that's a separate thing. But now it's just there is a ton of pressure as a 3 seed playing a 14, and that could be something that, it's another massive storyline. And if it happens again, I don't really know what the city of Lexington, I would not want to be there when that happens because it would probably be very bad.
Yeah, and Oakland, it's not Oakland, California, if I'm not mistaken. It was Oakland,
Um,
Michigan or something. Like,
yep. Yeah.
yeah,
I thought it was in California too, and then it just wasn't. I mean, it's a really small school, like we were saying about these schools where, we have kids never even had a dream of, well, they've always had a dream of playing D1, and they go to Oakland because that's the only one that they give them a scholarship to, or like a little leeway to actually be on the team. And then next thing you know, like Jack Golke, they explode and then sign a G League deal after that. So I mean, these schools are just it's scary. Playing at any 1, 2, 3, 4 seed playing against those schools, even a 5 seed against a 12, it's scary.
yeah,
And for those guys, knowing that, especially now, like we're talking about the pressure on Kentucky, they understand. I think one of the best things for this Kentucky team is knowing about the past. I mean, they can't think about it going into the game, but they can realize that okay, anything can happen. I mean, the Troy Trojans have a legitimate shot at beating us. So I think that if they keep that mindset, that can actually help them. But there's tons of pressure on them.
yeah, of course.
Something I'm going to pay attention to is, especially you, Tyler, since you'll be at the building in Milwaukee, if Kentucky gets off to a so-so start and it's a 4 point game with 8 minutes left to go in the first half, I wonder if the building starts showing some tension. I wonder if the guys start getting a little rattled. I really think they need a fast start. If they can just blow out Troy right away, that would just bring so much pressure off everyone.
And
Yeah, yeah.
also,
Last year, yeah, you got it, Henry.
sorry. Also, that's just a thing with these neutral sites in general that yeah, the fans of these teams travel and stuff, but a lot of them are neutral and they see, oh, an upset's brewing, and then most fans in the building start cheering for the upset. So for some of these big teams, it's almost like an away game in that sort of a sense that that the fans are really cheering against them, and it could put the
I
pressure.
disagree about Kentucky. They're a fan base that's worldwide, nationwide.
Yeah, I would say for any other team, I would probably say yeah. But Kentucky, I mean, when I was in Nashville, I mean, it's only 3 hours away, but it was a home game, 110%. I mean,
Yeah,
I
for the
wasn't
SEC
expecting
tournament, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see many Oklahoma fans, but every single Kentucky game I've been to this year, even when I was in Texas, there was a ton. There were Go Big Blue chants, CATS chants, and I was like, "What the hell is going on? Why are these people here from Texas
Hmm.
for like a middle regular season game?"
Yeah.
Um, for Kentucky, I would say it'll be a home game for every game they're in. Um,
Pretty much.
but for every other team, that absolutely plays a massive factor in how a lot of people do watch it, like we were saying in the beginning, because there are upsets and things that can never happen. So, especially because Kentucky's also like nationally, if you're not a Kentucky fan, a lot of people just don't like them because of how successful they are. It's kind of like the Patriots, the Chiefs. You don't like to see a team win all the time. And, with how successful they've been historically, there would be people that would, root for them to not win. But I think Kentucky fans are going to be wherever they are. Even if they were in San Francisco, I think it'd probably still be a home game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Like, that's a fan base that's going to be everywhere. But I really think they need a quick start.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It would just bring the tension out of the building like that. And if they can just blow them out with the first 10 minutes of the game, it would just get
Yeah.
people off their backs.
Like get
Yeah.
in into the lead and then like keep your foot on the or keep your foot on the gas. We just lost Tyler.
And I'll keep going. But although those guys weren't in the on the team last year, it's going to be on their heads if the game's close.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like the the problems with Oakland and St. Peter's is they just let Kentucky just let those teams stay in the game too long to where, 10 minutes left in the second half, it's like, oh crap, this is a real game.
All right, Tyler, what are some of the biggest storylines you're going to be paying attention to this tournament?
Yeah, I think like we were talking about in terms of pressure, I would say Auburn and Duke, because those are two teams that were fighting for the number one overall seed, and a lot of people wanted to see, really are curious to see how they translate into the tournament. But aside from that, those two massive ones, I would definitely, obviously, again, say Kentucky because of just the past and everything that's been going on, with their losses and their first round losses and upsets and just everything that could go wrong in every game has gone wrong. If they make it past there, I'd probably say at least that's one storyline off the table. They made it past the first round. I would say again, High Point too. You know, we were talking about a very small school, so I wouldn't really say it's a national storyline, but I think that's something that could absolutely develop into a storyline. And them coming in on their 14 game win streak. I mean, some people do understand that they are a very solid team, and they're not just a 13 seed High Point from North Carolina. I've never even heard of that school. So for the people that are mid major fanatics and love the upsets, they're definitely on the storyline right now watch list, but I would probably say Duke, Kentucky, and Auburn just because of the pressure that they all have.
Yeah, I totally agree with those. All right, last question. Leave us with this, Tyler. Who do you have winning it all this year?
It's really difficult, and I don't want to be that guy that just takes a one seed. But Florida, I mean, they're just so dominant. They swept the SEC tournament. They're playing the scariest basketball in the country right now. Any team that plays Florida, if I was a fan of any team that played Florida, I'd probably win there with no hope. Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Will Richard, they're playing out of their mind right now. Todd Golden has them in a really, really good spot. So my pick to win the national championship is definitely Florida, without a doubt.
I like that. They've been just on fire the last couple weeks.
Yeah, and
I think that would have been my answer too. Yeah.
a lot of people with their brackets, sometimes people go with the strategy of, oh, I'll pick a team that a lot of people wouldn't expect to win,
Hmm.
or maybe like a 2 or 3 seed that not everyone's going to have, just so that way, if no one else picks it, I get more points for it in terms of like tournament challenges and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think Florida, 100%. I mean, if you're making a real bracket based off of who you actually think is going to win, I think Florida, 100%.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Tyler. Tyler will be in Milwaukee covering all the games. He'll be covering Kentucky and all the games there. Tyler, if you want to say your socials, we'll also tag it on our Instagram and our other social media posts.
Yeah, so you can just follow me on Instagram at Tyler J Russ. I've been doing a lot on Twitter, talking a lot, obviously about Kentucky, but also other schools as well. As tournament season approaches, my Twitter is the same, just Tyler J Russ. And on my YouTube, I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers, so that's pretty cool. But on there, it's also just Tyler J Russ. So on all those platforms, just Tyler J Russ, and you guys can find me there. I just want to say thank you guys for having me on. It was really cool. I've done a lot of podcasts, having people on, and it's really cool to actually be getting the questions this time and not just asking them. So I really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah, it
much
was
for
fun.
coming
You're our first
on.
guest. Yeah.
Yeah, first guest. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.